Hello, writers. This month I want to talk to you all about how to recognize when the internal critic is present. What is the internal critic? Well, the internal critic is that voice and that part of our subconscious, our ego, our psyche, who wants to shut down our creative process and stop us from writing. I'm sure we could get into the psychology of it. I'm not sure why we have the internal critic, but I can guarantee that just about every single person who is a writer, whether they're successful or just a beginning writer, even artists and any sort of creative person has an internal critic whose primary goal is to stop us in our tracks and short circuit the creative process for us. So I want to talk to you today about how to recognize when the internal critic is present and then what to do to battle that internal critic. And perhaps the most dangerous part of the internal critic is that this critic sounds just like you or I. They have our voice, and so they can sneak under the radar and come into the room when we're sitting down and trying to write, and we won't even recognize that they're there. I'm getting my information this month from Judy Reeves' book, A Writer's Book of Days. I recommend it as a great writing resource. She breaks up the book into months and days, and every day has another little tidbit on writing practice along with writing prompts. So if you like to have a daily writing practice, this is a great book for you to access and use. So, all right. First way we know the internal critic is present in the room is when we stop in the middle of the piece and we think, oh, this is terrible. This isn't working. This is just a load of rubbish. You can stop right there and know that that's not actually you talking. That's not actually a part of the creative process. That's actually the conniving, sneaking internal critic who's on your shoulder whispering into your ear. The other way you know the critic is in the room is when you hear a voice demanding, who do you think you are? Do you think anyone's going to read this? This is ridiculous. This is such a waste of people's time. And who do you think you are to come in and write about this? You're not an expert. You're just a wannabe. This is my internal critic's favorite mantra. And my dog's barking outside. Favorite mantra. And that is when I'm in the middle of writing a book, so often this voice creeps into my psyche and says, oh, who do you think you are to write this? To have the right to take up people's time and no one's going to read this. This is just so lame. The other thing, you get distracted as you're typing. Suddenly you look at your hands and you realize, oh, my nails are really scruffy, or oh man, my hands are looking really old or wrinkly, or whatever. You get distracted. You think about, oh, the laundry. I need to switch the laundry over, and oh, I don't know if I can write until my kitchen's clean. I think I should clean up my kitchen. I'm such a bad I'm so bad at like managing things. So those sort of negative voices or distractions you can recognize as part of the tactics that the internal critic uses. You start to channel people's criticism of your writing. All of us at some point in time have experienced rejection over our writing. We've had, whether it be a teacher or a fellow writer, someone who's given us some bad feedback and shut us down. And that voice starts to creep back in again when we sit down to write. Or we may imagine their face sort of hovering before us or on the page. That's how we know that's not a part of the creative process. That's the internal critic. Lastly, she says you may imagine people laughing behind your back, not just your friends, but agents or publishers, and they're all laughing because your writing is so bad, it's hilarious. And this makes me think of Anne Lamott's book, Bird by Bird. She shares in one of her chapters about writing really what she calls shitty first drafts, and just giving ourselves the freedom to just write terrible first drafts, just get it out on the page. But she says she has this sort of lingering fear that she's going to write her rubbish first draft and then get hit by a truck and die and never get to revise it, and people are going to read the first draft and say, what a terrible writer she was. How are we all duped into believing she was such a good writer? So once you recognize that the internal critic is on your shoulder and in the room and trying to mess with your head and your writing process, how do we battle that critic? Well, Judy Reeves has some great advice. She says you can write down all of the terrible things that the critic is saying to you and then tear it up or burn it. She says you can speak to the critic, and this is often what I do. I just imagine it on my shoulder and I say to it, you can come back later when I'm in the revision process, but you're not welcome in the generative process. So shoo, get out of here. She says you can bully the bully. You can say, listen, you little twerp, leave me alone. Um, but she says ultimately, and I agree too, it's recognizing that the internal critic is really our insecure ego. It's the part of us that's sort of bucking against our fears and our doubts and our insecurities. And to recognize it, maybe give it some grace and tell it, you know what, you don't have a place in the creative process for me right now. I hope that's helpful to you. I've included a link in our newsletter this month with a handout that outlines some of this for you. My dumb dog. He's barking at a train. So anyway, if you have any questions, let me know. And yeah, also in the newsletter, I talk about our next upcoming workshop that I have for July. Hope you guys have a great month of writing. Bye.